Hello and welcome back to another video. In a previous video of mine, we talked about the next candidates to join the European Union. Today, we'll talk about the exact opposite. Today we'll talk about the countries in which big percentages of its people would like to leave the European Union. The European Union isn't just a bag of sweets, in which everything is good. The European Union has its pros and cons, and the people in these countries see more cons than pros. Now, before starting, I want to make it clear that I'm not racist or anything like that. I want to say before starting that immigration doesn't equal crime or danger, but there are a few immigrants that keep some areas in Europe and North America dangerous. Now, let's get on with the nations that might leave the EU. Netherlands. The Netherlands have been part of the European Union since it was first made, and it was even the location in which it was established. However, the Netherlands is one of the countries with the highest immigration levels in the world. The Netherlands have a population of just over 17 million people, out of which, over 2 million are of no Dutch background, and from countries in Africa, South America, and Asia. The Dutch people have also invested a lot into the EU, and they haven't got as much back as they expected. According to polls, it seems that at least 16% of Dutch people are in favor of leaving the European Union, and another 10% wouldn't mind leaving it. The Netherlands is for now one of the safest countries in the world, but since the immigration levels have started to get high, so has the crime rate. The Netherlands is still a relatively safe and secure country, but if the country continues like this, the Netherlands we know today might not be the same Netherlands in the future. The Prime Minister, Mark Rutte, is trying to keep peace in the nation, but a few angry nationalists are doing exactly the opposite, creating racism and making panic. Sweden. If you thought the Netherlands was bad, wait to hear about Sweden. Sweden has an even higher number of immigrants, most of them coming from Iraq and the Middle East. Sweden has a population of almost 10 million, out of which, 14.3% or 1.3 million are foreign-born. Sweden was a nice and peaceful nation till not too long ago, but lately, the country has turned into a chaotic nation. Streets with signs saying, "No go," have started to rise. And the crime rate has skyrocketed. Swedes are getting scared of what might happen, and if this immigration continues like this, it's predicted that by 2050, only in 31 years, over 30% of Sweden's population would be predominantly Muslim. That's right. If this immigration levels continue, Sweden would have gone from having less than 1% of its population following Islam, to up to 30% in less than 100 years. This and other factors are scaring the nation and its people. Peaceful cities like Malmö have turned into complete chaos and no-go zones, and Muslim and black gangs are ruling some areas. Political parties have started to rise in the country, to leave the EU and lower the immigration levels. Shortly after Brexit, and the UK leaving the European Union, Frexit started rising. France has invested a lot in the European Union, and they haven't got as much back. France hasn't just suffered economically though. Immigration also skyrocketed over the last 3 decades in France, and almost 10% of France's population is foreign-born. With immigration came more crime, as crime also skyrocketed. France has turned into one of the most dangerous countries in Europe, especially in areas such as Marseille, which are filled with illegal immigrants. Most immigrants come from North Africa and other Muslim countries, and over 5% of France's population is Muslim. The French people started getting tired, and after a long discussion with the EU, France had to ban the burqa, as Marseille and other cities are filled with women wearing it, and it was scaring children. Soon after this, France became one of the favorite locations for Muslim terrorist organizations, such as ISIS and Al-Qaeda. France then, and still to this day, is one of the countries with the most terrorist attacks. For this, French anti-EU parties have started to rise, and by polls, we know that over 20% of France is in favor of leaving the European Union. If this continues, France will end up leaving the EU. Italy also has a big percentage of its population tired of the EU. A total of 59% of Italians have a positive view of the EU, while 39% see it in a negative light. The European Union did economically help Italy after the Second World War, but lately, the EU is being more negative on the EU than positive. Italy has also been hit hard by immigration, to a point in which Italians elected a far-right president to stop this immigration. Sergio Mattarella, named a fascist by many, is extremely tired of the illegal immigrants from North Africa and the Middle East, and he has practically denied entry for all immigrants. Italy have a population very similar to that of France, with practically the same percentage of immigrants. Over 5 million foreign-born people call Italy home, and this number is only going to increase if Italy stay in the European Union. If Italy's immigration keeps on like this, by 2050, almost 15% of its population would be Muslim, and an even greater percentage would be foreign-born. Italy is also the most corrupt nations in Europe, something the EU doesn't like. Anti-Europe parties have started to rise in the nation, and over 20% of Italians are in favor of leaving. Surprisingly, Greece tops the list of countries likely to be next to quit the European Union. Unlike the other countries we've talked about, Greece has a complete different motive to leave the EU. The major reason why Greece might be seeing its way out of the European Union is not because of immigration or anything like that, but because of their high debt. Greece is one of the countries with the highest debts in the world. The small nation has a GDP of 200 billion, and its debt is of over 350 billion. That means that Greece's debt is over 176% its GDP. For a comparison, Germany only has 64% of its GDP in debt. This number is only gonna get higher if Greece stays in the European Union, and countries like France, Germany and the Netherlands are still waiting for Greece to pay them back and its debt. This and the euro crisis are some of the reasons Greece is the most likely to leave the EU after the United Kingdom. However, this may not bother most Greeks, as 71% said in a recent poll that they had an unfavorable view of the EU. On the other hand, the Greek president, Prokopis Pavlopoulos, has always had a favorable view of the EU, and he has tried to fix and lower Greece's debt while staying in the EU. For now, Greece's debt will only increase, making it even more likely for them to leave the European Union. The European Union doesn't seem as united as before. Well, I've only talked about the most possible next countries to leave the EU. Of course there are more countries with big percentages of its people against the European Union. Some of these are the Czech Republic, Hungary, Austria, Slovakia, Poland, Ireland. And of course, we can't talk about countries leaving the EU without mentioning the United Kingdom. The UK has been negotiating with the EU for over 3 years, and it's estimated that they will finally leave in 2020. However, we don't know what will happen with Scotland, as they might independence to stay in the European Union and leave the United Kingdom. If Scotland independences, this will affect the UK, and its negotiations with the EU. Finally, we've finished. Well, finished isn't the best word, as the remaining countries still have a few people that are against the European Union, but they don't have as much of a big percentage as the other countries. The European Union isn't very united, and I'm pretty confident that a few of these might end up leaving the European Union. Of course, this doesn't mean that the EU is bad, and it's filled with bad things. But these countries are getting really tired. Don't forget to see my video about the countries that do want to form part of the European Union, but aren't part yet. For now, Europe has 28 members. However, this number will change, over and over and over again, for good or bad. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If so, comment where you're from and if you like or dislike the European Union.